Bruh, just seeing how they clean or cleanse the living dolls is way worse than it needed to be, but I'm so glad they went the way they did, because I love it when anime just really mess with characters, and holy shit, it was bad enough when you saw them hogtied, and I mean, just based on the initial camera position of when they were showing them being cleaned, I was like, god damn, where's that water initially going in before it comes out? But to see, like, just what they do to those that are dirty, right? I mean, on one hand, if you were to just strip it down to like technically what it is and explain it to people, they're probably going to say, oh, it doesn't sound too bad. Yeah, they're tied up and yeah, they get water force in their mouth and they spit it up. But I mean, when you see it in action, that is straight up torture. And to see like moments prior to that with like the twins in this weird thing that looks like a furnace and they're like just looks like zombies. There is so much about this Shadows family that is beyond messed up, and I love watching it. I think it is disturbing, it is messed up, and I'm always excited to see where it's gonna go from here. But I have to say, this is hands down the best content Shadows House has released, and I'm talking about this season as a whole. And I was talking with a couple of different people who said like, yeah, this is my favorite arc in the manga, and based on what I'm hearing, this arc should be lasting the full season unless the pacing decides to up the ante midway through. And for someone who thinks this is the most intriguing concept, mysterious robed figure, the whole idea that now we have someone like Kate being kind of having the blame pinned on her because someone like Edward is, well, you know, he's him, so he's obviously going to try to get revenge on the person who he thinks makes him look like a fool. And the Starbearers, well, they're obviously not going to want to get on the bad side, so they're kind of letting her do her own investigation, but not really aiding in her in the process. There's so much about the mystery of this season, and it takes an already amazing show into brand new territory. I'm not gonna lie, if you've been watching a handful of the videos of all the shows I'm covering this season, you know how much I'm loving this anime season, but I'm not gonna lie, Shadows House, I'd consider to be like in the top 5 of this season, and that's not an exaggeration for me. I think the characters, the world, and just, it feels better than what came before. And I think because it used season 1 as almost a setup, right? It now really lets that setup be payoff. You have all these connections to these characters, and the mystery is so much more interesting because there's so many different opinions of what this mysterious mask-robed figure is. On one hand, the blame got pinned on people who obviously didn't do anything wrong. They were controlled, and yes, they did smash the bottle of coffee, but I mean, thankfully they smashed it, as otherwise who knows how many people would have been continued to be brainwashed and potentially never saved. But it's not like they did it, but they're getting blamed, and now we see the torture of that blame. Even if they had bitchy personalities, ain't no one really deserved that, right? Well, I mean, Edward might deserve that, but that's beyond the point. But ultimately, just seeing the characters and just how more ferocious someone like Kate is. If you compare her very kind of timid, cool, calm, and collected nature in season 1, to see her don't give a shit attitude in season 2 is amazing. I used to be kind of worried that if either Emilico or Kate stepped out of line, game over, people would die, something bad would happen. Now I'm kind of cheering when she does it. Like when she was sitting there kind of getting grilled because they're saying, oh, you know, you're basically in trouble. This is without a doubt you. She just storms in and gets more pissed off to the point that she has these spiky soot rocks on the ceiling because obviously she just emitted such a massive amount of soot. But just to see how she didn't give a shit and pushed back and said, are you going to basically be the bitches of someone who doesn't give a shit about you? And I'm like, damn, Kate. That's pretty intense. But then to just see the escalation of that, the amount of like power she radiates anymore is insane. Even in the simple moments when they're getting gawked at the end of the episode when they're like, ooh, they're on a date, they don't care where they are. She's getting like super pissed off and she's basically emitting some Super Saiyan level energy, but just the Shadows equivalent of that. It's crazy to see how powerful she actually is. And I think it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, she's getting places. She's doing what she needs to do to get the answers. And on one hand, that's amazing to witness. She's someone who had a goal of being a Starbearer, and I mean, of course, the main character is probably going to get to a location. But there was a lot of pushback against that idea, I think, if you look at season 1. But seeing where she's currently at, it no longer feels like an impossible dream. But where the double-edged sword comes into play is that the moments with Barbie and Barbara, right, when they are looking at the aftermath when Kate left, they see the soot that she radiated. I kind of have a feeling that there might be some pushback in a way that someone like Barbie/Barbara will be able to get out of the day in and day out they have to be suffering because of the collecting of her massive amount of soot. Not to say that it would completely stop for her, but I'm almost wondering if they're going to try to pass part of the excruciating pain onto someone like Kate, because she clearly is emitting a similar amount of power. So that does have me worried, even though I do think she's a badass bitch at this point who doesn't take basically anything from anyone. And just to see how she, like, runs into her acquaintances, like, when seeing Sean and John go down the, like, peace trough there and stuff, just the fact that he does it so elegantly, and then you see it on the other perspective and just, like, the slow, almost Looney Tunes level directing, absolutely fantastic. But I just wasn't expecting that they would be able to ease the tension in certain ways in the way that they did. Like when they ran into Mia, right? You know, last we saw her, she was in pretty bad shape. And then to see her prank of like freaking out, on one hand, it's good to see that she's back to seemingly normal, not really brainwashed, but also being herself. On the other hand, I mean, how many people aren't getting that treatment of just being able to sit in a bed, but have to be stuffed in a furnace and, you know, force-fed the water and stuff? It's just so excruciatingly disturbing. And they didn't need to go in as hard as they did with the art design with any of the torture moments, but that shit was graphic, man. Even if people weren't bleeding or being stabbed, that was pretty disturbing. I mean, they made some crisp-ass art decisions that looked beautiful in terms of artistic detail, but horrifying because of the context of that image. And damn, Shadow's House is not playing around this season. I truly think it's one of this season's best. I think it's criminally underappreciated. The people who watch Shadow's House, I think for the most part, consider it to be at the very least a pretty good show, and I feel like most people think it's amazing. But it just feels like so many people overlook season 1, and now we're overlooking season 2. And these are the types of episodes and the arcs that, if you're not experiencing them as they're coming out, it's almost like a missed opportunity because there's so much mystery going on and it feels like payoff for so much setup in season 1, and now we're experiencing the best that Shadow's House has to offer. Granted, there could be better content in future arcs, but as it stands, to me, this seems like the best that we've experienced, and based on a lot of people's opinions, it seems like this is their favorite arc, and I can completely understand why. Visually, it's not that different from the first season, but it almost does feel like there's a little bit extra quality poured into this season. Just the way the characters move, the expressions, and just the details in some of the finer moments. It is a beautiful looking series, and like I've said over multiple videos, for having half the cast not having emotions other than radiating soot, it is one of the more filled shows with expression. And yes, it does help that they have their living dolls. But even when you're just looking at these shadows, there's so much detail about how they're presenting themselves, and it's just such a weird show to watch in the best possible way. There's always a question in your mind, and even when that question isn't the main one being brought up, it always makes sure that there's another mystery for you to focus on. But thoughts down below, what did you think of this pretty torture-filled episode, but slightly hopeful at the same time? We ended a pretty funny cliffhanger with them discovering the lab, so I guess we'll see where it goes from here. But thoughts down below, leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. Till next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.